Today on Bridges, we will talk about seeing the faithfulness of God in the shadow of grief. My guest today on Bridges is Jonathan Pitts, and he is a pastor and a dad. More importantly, he's going to share with us his story today. The book that he's written is called My Winter Season, and it's about seeing God's faithfulness in the shadow of grief. And Jonathan, it's really nice to meet you and have you here today.
I'm glad to be with you today.
I appreciate that you could come. Now, you're also a pastor here in the Franklin area. What's the name of the church?
Yeah, I'm the executive pastor at Church of the City, our main, the biggest campus we have, which is in Franklin there. We've got one in downtown, then we've got one in Spring Hill as well. I sit on a team that kind of oversees all three.
Well, it's so glad to have you as a part of our area and our community. And I know that we're going to talk about a tough subject, or what can be a tough subject, of grief. And you've gone through a lot of that, losing your late wife, Winter, and you've kind of journaled that in this book, My Winter Season. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, My Winter Season is just the story that I kind of share, almost like a memoir over the last, really talks a lot about our life together, but then it talks mostly about the time between Winter's passing and the next 2 years, I'd say, where God was meeting me in really incredible ways. And I would say the verse that kind of defines that would be Psalm 134:7, which says, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he rescues them." And I would say my story is one of rescue, of God literally showing up and rescuing me, but not like this spirit Never Never Land, but like literally like this God who shows up with his tangible presence and through his people. And so there's a lot of stories in there. You'll see a lot of different names and people that have been in my life that have showed up for me and have been God's hands and feet to me and to my girls and to my family.
Yeah, because you have, when you say girls, like you have a lot of girls.
I guess 4 is a lot. Yeah, 4. I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and I have twin 11-year-olds. And when their mom passed, when Winter passed, they were 14, 11, and 9. And it was like Dad moving to Nashville from Dallas, because she actually passed away in Dallas right after we had moved here. And we decided to keep coming, and I thought I could make it on my own. I'm like, I'll be okay, I'll make it. And I could not make it with 4 girls without support. And by God's grace, he sent lots of support to me.
Yeah.
So.
Was it hard for you to accept like people reaching out and support?
Yeah, I would say one of the hardest things to do was to accept people's help, because you want to be, I think, as a man, and you just want to be strong, and you want to, it's weird to not want to accept the help that God sends you, but for whatever reason, I think the biggest part of it is you don't feel like you can ever pay it back, and you don't want to accept something you can't pay back. But isn't that the gospel, you know?
It's just the whole thing.
Yeah, it's the whole of the gospel. Like, you get a gift you can't ever pay back. And that's really, learning to receive was massive for my faith, because I'd learned how to give, you know? And I think growing up in kind of Christendom, you know, although we understand that we receive God's grace very free of cost, I think there's still like this works-based thing that we have, and it's taught me a lot about the grace of God and receiving it. I mean, I felt like I was receiving God's grace in waves, like wave after wave, when I needed it most. Financially, time management, physical support, like literally these 4 girls that need to get to school, and I have this new job, and it was just so much, and God just provided wave after wave of grace.
Yeah. And you know, even with all of that, you were still in a season of loss and a season of grief and navigating through that. And I think that I understand what you're saying when you say it is just hard to accept help when you know you can't pay it back. Because I think it's in us to want to pay stuff back. Yeah. Like, you do something nice for me, not that it's,
Yeah, it's not tit for tat, but we feel like it is. Like, in our hearts.
In our hearts, we want to do something back. And so you're this guy, this pastor, this author, this Christian, you're in incredible grief, and people want to help. And I think part of receiving is understanding that people want to help. Like, it's in us to want to help too.
Right. Yeah, it just was an incredible season of learning for me, and the reality that God wants to provide for our greatest needs. But I think I was always in the seat of being a provider. Like, in some way, I'm a pastor, and I was a leader. I ran Tony Evans Ministry in Dallas and had 40 people that I led, and I'm leading my girls, and I'm leading my family, and you know, you're kind of hardwired to provide, and when you can't provide, like accepting God's provision, it was just a learning curve for me. Yeah. Now it's easier for me to receive, and it also has made me more grateful and more willing to give to those that are really in need. Like, it's opened my eyes to the need around me as well. So,
because I wondered, as a pastor, being in a situation where you're in that season of grief and you're not married, if that helped you understand kind of the plight of people that aren't in a marriage.
Yeah, I remember sitting down with my boss, our senior pastor, another man in our church who had gone through a really horrible divorce and was really upset and had bitterness about it because he felt like it was unjust, and it was. And I'll never forget him looking at me and just going, I don't know how you're walking through what you're walking through. And I looked at him and I was like, I don't know how you're walking through what you're walking through. And we were able to pray together, and yeah, just people are going through a lot. There's a lot of people going through a lot. It could be the loss of a spouse, it could be the loss of another loved one. It could be an unwanted divorce. It could be the loss of a child. I mean, we had a recent big accident here in Nashville where a family lost their child, and could be the loss of a job. Like, I would say that grief is really just working through lost expectations.
Yeah.
You know, and it comes in different shapes and sizes. And I've realized now more than ever, like, how regardless of what you've lost, it can oftentimes feel the same.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you just said a word there that I was thinking about the other day, and that's expectations. Because as a Christian, I will say, I've surrendered all, that I want God's will, not mine. And that's true. But yet I still have expectations, right?
Yep.
When you got married, when you married Winter, you would not expect that you would lose her.
Yeah, we were married.
So young.
Yeah, we were married 15 years and 27 days. We just celebrated our 15-year anniversary, and I would have thought we'd been married for 30 years or 40 years. I also would have expected that I would pass away before she did. So I'd never thought about possibly losing her, and I had lots of expectations. We had kids pretty young, and so we expected that they would graduate and we'd travel, and we talked about, you know, going to Europe and doing this and doing that, and very fast, I mean, in a matter of seconds, that was gone and over. And the thing that I was really grateful for in that, though, is we had a really intentional marriage, and so not perfectly, but we intentionally loved each other. We intentionally parented our girls, and so I don't look back now with any regret. I look back with sadness over things we didn't experience that we thought we would, but not over regret, because the things that God was calling us to do very intentionally, we were at least seeking. We were on the path of seeking, and so in that I'm really grateful.
Yeah, and it's good to have that sense of gratefulness. I'm sure, though, Jonathan, there are people watching also who are in that season of grief, and they might have regret in that too. How would they, if they got the book My Winter Season, how might that be helpful to them to process through grief and maybe regret, or maybe just expectation, loss?
Yeah, I would say one of the themes of the book is, you know, the Bible says, set your mind on things above, not on things from earth. It says, renew your mind in Christ. There's a theme of this, what some of the ancients would call the discipline of celebration, which is Philippians 4, verse 8. Philippians 4:8 says, whatever is true, right, honorable, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, think about these things, dwell on these things. And it's not self-help that the Apostle Paul is trying to teach us. It's having a perspective of gratitude. And ultimately, to have a perspective of gratitude, you have to be thinking about these things. Whatever is true, right, honorable, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, think about these things. And so one of the things I would say is, in my deepest grief, in my deepest sadness, and maybe God just wired me a little bit this way, but I would just try to look for, what did God do? What did God give me? Like, what can I be grateful for, even in my deep sadness, even my deep fear, even my deep hurt? There were all these different emotions that were swirling, but even in that, Paul's talking as a prisoner for the gospel to a bunch of people going through persecution and difficulty as new believers in Jesus, and he's saying, whatever is true, right, honorable, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy, think about these things. In the middle of your circumstances, in the middle of your deepest grief, in the middle of your deepest fears, think about the things that are going to orient your heart towards gratitude to Jesus. And think about the things that are going to stir you up in the spirit for Jesus. And so it's just it's a perspective shift. I think the book is a collection of stories that is me paying attention to what God is doing despite my circumstances.
Wow.
And that's what I would hope they would get out of the book, is seeing God in the middle of their circumstances, that he's nearer than they've ever thought, that he's more powerful than they've ever known, even in their darkest grief.
Yeah, because part of that in Philippians 4, there's a verse in there that talks about the Lord is at hand. The Lord is near.
Yeah, I think it's 4:4.
Yeah, and so sometimes I have to tell myself that. Like, I may feel like I'm falling apart, that what I was expecting to happen or the way that I prayed didn't happen, but the Lord is near.
That's right.
And that brings me comfort because he's near. And so even though I may not understand what's happening, I understand that he does and that he's with me. But like, you've got the grief of a husband and you've got 4 girls. How do you help them? And do you talk about that in the book, Jonathan?
Yeah, I talk about, I mean, literally, my three youngest girls were there when their mom passed away. I was trying to save her life. That was really difficult. I talk about that. I talk about being at the hospital and realizing that Winter is gone, and knowing that one of the greatest jobs I had was leading my girls to that moment. There's a psychologist, his name's Kurt Thompson, I referenced in that book. He says, to the degree that a parent can make sense of their story will be to the degree that a child can be secure in theirs. And so I talk about security for our kids, and they're watching us and how we respond. And that's not to say that we should be performance-based, but it is to say you're leading them, and that you have the opportunity to lead them either to despair, or you have the opportunity to lead them to the Father. Mm-hmm. And I just talk about that, some of the ways I failed, codependence as a dad, wanting the right thing for my girls, but wanting that it's so bad that I was just kind of managing around them and not leading them. And so I talk a lot about that. The thing that the girls and I have shared together, I think that's been the greatest gift, has been worship. Mm-hmm. Like in our darkest moments, just worshiping the Lord, thanking God, praising God, calling on Him, like in our despair. I'll never forget laying on my brother-in-law's guest bedroom bed, my Winter's brother's house where we stayed a few nights after she passed, and having nothing at all but worship, having nothing else but Jesus, knowing that He was near, but still not really believing it. So just calling on Him in worship. Mm-hmm. And so we've really shared that. I talk about that a lot as well. But yeah, I share a lot about just the way that my story unfolds, because my girls are a very big part of that. So they're laced through the whole thing.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really appreciated in your book, that you talked about worship and songs and hymns. And I think that when we worship God, mm-hmm. and we put our attention and our affection on Him, in spite of our situation, we can know His presence in a new way that you can't necessarily articulate it in words, mm-hmm. but His presence comes. And so you were experiencing that with your girls.
Yeah, it's just really interesting for us as believers. We believe that we are now the temple of God. Like He dwells inside of us, His Spirit dwells inside of us. And so we have this amazing opportunity to bring that out in our lives. Mm-hmm. And worship is probably, at least for me, maybe for all of us, the key ingredient, but it's just like calling on God, remembering He's there, and watching Him express Himself in our deepest, darkest circumstances. It's actually really beautiful.
That's so important. We've got to take a break. I want you to stay with us, though. When we come back, we're going to continue to talk about my winter season and seeing God's faithfulness in the shadow of grief.
If you're looking for ways to grow your faith, we invite you to go to monicaschmelzer.com, where you can watch Bridges interviews and Monica's teachings on demand. You'll also find free online extras that offer practical ways to live out your faith. Visit monicaschmelzer.com, where you'll find hope, because truth changes everything.
Log on to www.ctntv.org, where you can make a prayer request, view our program guide, see who's on Bridges, or even watch one of Monica's latest teachings. Log on to www.ctntv.org.
Join the Bridges community on Facebook. Visit Facebook and search for Bridges with Monica. We would love to connect with you.
If you're just joining us today on Bridges, my guest is Jonathan Pitts, and we are talking about seeing God's faithfulness in the shadow of grief, and he is recounting his personal story of losing his wife. His wife's name is Winter. The book is My Winter Season, and how he walked through that journey, leading his 4 girls, as well as being a pastor and author and a host of other responsibilities, how God showed up for him time and time again. And Jonathan, we talked a little bit in the first segment about how initially it was hard for you to receive help, and yet you're in all of this grief and people want to help. What are some ways that God really showed up for you in your grief?
Yeah, I'll say one of the first was my now boss, Darren Whitehead, senior pastor at Church of the City. I'll never forget, I was in Dallas and I didn't know if I was going to continue our move. We had bought a house here, we had moved our stuff here, but I still could have stayed in the life in Dallas that we had. We had family there, everything. Well, he called me and he just said, "Hey, Jonathan," he was like, "if you want to stay in Dallas, we'll sell your house, we'll get your stuff back, don't worry about any of it. But if you come, you'll find a family that's ready to adopt you." Mm-hmm. And what's been really beautiful is over the last 2.5 years, we did decide to come. We came. I had a 6-week sabbatical even before I started my job. And honestly, that church, my church family, Church of the City, has adopted us, and we've become a part of this massive, amazing kingdom of God family and expression of the body of Christ that's really been a healing for me and my girls. It's been healing. The second would be that next day, the day of Winter's funeral. We buried her, and it was a beautiful service, worship service, really. My sister Carmen walked up to me. She was single, never been married, never had kids, and she said, "John, I feel like the Lord told me, like, if you need me, I need to come." So I thought for about 2 weeks. I'm like, "I'm fine, Carmen, don't worry about it." At the funeral, I said that, and then got to Nashville. I was sitting in the kitchen with my girls. I'd burned a chicken. And they hadn't even started school yet, by the way. I'd burned a chicken. I remember them laughing at me and me running upstairs kind of in tears. And I just called Carmen and I said, "Hey, is that offer still on the table?" And 2 weeks later, Labor Day weekend of 2018, she had sold her car, gotten out of her lease at her apartment, and flew to Nashville with 3 suitcases, landing at BNA. And she's been with us since. And a woman that was known as Cece to my girls, or Aunt Cece, is now affectionately just known as Cece. She was Aunt Cece, now she's just Cece. And she's been, I've jokingly referred to her as a helpmate because she's been that much to me. And obviously she's my sister, she's not my helpmate, but she's been so supportive. And she actually has a master's degree in counseling. And so she's counseled me, she's counseled my girls. And God's just that kind that he would literally send this unbelievable, beautiful, single woman and sister of mine to me who is a counselor, who just loves us sacrificially. He'd send that into our lives, and he'd surround us with a community that loves us as well. And those are just 2 of the biggest stories.
And I bet probably Cece doesn't burn the chicken.
Cece does not burn the chicken. Cece's an amazing cook, an amazing chef.
See, that's even wonderful.
She loves cooking. It's awesome.
That's good.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways that God just showed up. You were thinking you didn't need it. Because I think sometimes, Jonathan, we think as Christians, I know that I've definitely felt this way before, that when I'm going through a loss or a trauma, I sort of want to just handle it on my own. I feel like if I just, if I pray hard enough and if I lean into the Lord hard enough, that I don't, that I just don't need to reach out or let people in. And what I hear you saying is that you kind of went through maybe some of that, but maybe that's not the best response to grief.
Yeah, I mean, I went through the reality of, like, you have to feel what you feel, you have to be where you are, but you don't have to be there alone. And so I would say, I had moments where I was by myself, and I actually enjoy being by myself and processing sometimes and reading. And I never enjoyed quiet like I enjoy quiet now, because I'd never had quiet in my life. I always had Winter. I have an identical twin brother. Before that, I had a roommate. I mean, I have all these different people in my life. But, the Bible talks about bringing things into the light, and oftentimes I think bringing things, especially our struggles and our fears, our worries, our even our resentments, like bringing those things into the light and into relationship with others can actually give us better perspective, and people can come alongside of us and help us how they can. And so, I would say for anybody grieving, anybody walking through loss, like, do it with a community, because that will also help you get perspective. And one of the biggest perspectives is you're not the only one going through stuff. I think we can get, when we're by ourselves, we get this place where I'm the only one, my pain, woe is me. I mean, I could be there. And the reality is we're not. We're all walking through something, and we can all identify with each other, and we can all kind of just, I'm trying to think how to say it, but we can all kind of draft behind those that have been walking through something, that have encouragement, and we can give them, and they can give us comfort just like they've received comfort. And so I would say, do it in community. Remember that you're not alone, and you'll get better perspective as well.
Because we all have something to give, and we all have something to receive. Like, that's just the honest truth, no matter how we want to come at this thing. And I think the tendency when any of us have disappointments, loss, expectations, that tendency to think, oh, I'm the only one, right? Like, God answered everybody else's prayers. Everybody else has a happy family or whatever it is, right? And none of that is true.
No, you can only think that if you're just looking at their social media lives. But if you get up close and personal with people, you're going to see that everybody's walking through something. Everybody's got, well, not everybody, but people have marital issues. People have issues with their kids. People have issues with their jobs. It's like, there's so many out there, and ultimately being in community will grant you proper perspective. But isn't that the kingdom of God, what you just said there? Like, everyone has something to give, everyone has something to receive. It's just really beautiful. It's kingdom of God stuff.
And for me, that's just helped me, like, just to understand, okay, so I don't have to worry that I'm always going to be the taker, and that if I'm receiving all this help, no, I have something to give, and I have things that I need to receive, and that whole community thing, which I think the book, My Winter Season, and again, it's Seeing God's Faithfulness in the Shadow of Grief, written by Jonathan Pitts. I think that's one of the things that you really unpack for us, is that God is still God no matter what, but we still need community. And I can hear people right now, especially people, Jonathan, that are just hurting and grieving. But how do I find community? How do I know that people are safe? You know, like people showed up for Jonathan. Well, he's a pastor, but how can I, an average person, and what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, you have to understand that people are people, regardless of whether they're believers in the kingdom of God or not. And so they're going to fail you. They're going to mess up.
Yeah.
Just because I'm a pastor and I'm surrounded by other pastors, I mean, we're human. We mess up. We have issues. We have quirks. We have oddities. So I would just say, like, you have to be willing to be human and to receive others as humans and not put this expectation on people that they're going to be perfect. We oftentimes walk away from community and walk away from a relationship because we feel like we've been failed. And I think the number one thing you need to walk into a relationship with is knowing that you're going to be failed, because we're human. Like, walk into marriage knowing you're going to be failed by your spouse, walking into parenting knowing that your kids are going to fail you. I think if we have the proper perspective, we'll never be surprised when we are hurt. And then we're willing to do what we're supposed to do as believers, which is forgive and also be forgiven.
Yeah.
That's a part of community.
Yeah,
So,
it is. And I think just realistic expectations that we all have a sin nature and we're all broken, and none of us bring perfection. We just bring who we are, we bring what we've learned. And I think that to learn how to forgive people and the gift of forgiveness and overlooking, you mentioned like oddities and quirks.
Yep.
You know, there are some things we just need to overlook in people. Like, they're not sin issues. It's just, we're all,
just
you know,
different. We're different.
exactly, and we come at things different ways. So I think community, because community used to be very hard for me, because I had these expectations that it's going to be like this, and just kind of like, okay, so we're all odd in our own ways, but
exactly.
it's okay. Like, it's if it's not a sin issue, then I just don't even need to address that. I just need to accept and love, and give and receive. And I think that's so much of what you unpack. I do want to ask you now, Jonathan, did anyone ever say to you, talk to you about moving on, or what would that look like or be like for you?
Yeah, it's funny. God talked to me about moving on the day before Winter's funeral. I was in my brother-in-law's house. I was tired. There were too many people in the house. I had to get outside. And so I went out of the house, like, to try to find some fresh air. And I hit the 107-degree July Texas weather. I'm just like overwhelmed. So I kneeled down below a fence to get out in the shade. I put my earbuds in and I hit play on Spotify on a playlist I'd been playing the morning Winter passed away. The day she passed away, I took a run that morning. And it was a pastor named Stephen Furtick, and he has this literally song called Moving On. And it's I think it's Genesis 39, and it says, Jacob buried Rachel. He set a memorial, and then he moved on. And he's got this 2-minute little sermonette, and he's talking about Jacob moved on, but Jacob didn't only move on, but God changed his name from Jacob to Israel. And he says Israel moved on because God had a plan for Israel. Like, God had a plan for him, and he had these sons that he had to get to a different land. And like, there's all these things that God is doing. But Jacob didn't move on he memorialized Rachel. Like, he set a marker at her tomb, and it says that marker is still there to this day. And so it was like God was telling me, hey, you're going to move on. You're going to set up a marker. You're going to set up a memorial. I believe this book is a part of it. Like, you're going to remember, and you're going to celebrate what God did.
Yeah.
But what God did doesn't mean that God is done. Like, God still has things to do. He still has these 4 girls he needs you to raise. And if you're here, he still has a plan for you. And Acts 13:36, it says that David served the purposes of God for his generation, and then he fell asleep. And I believe that verse to be true of Winter. Like, she served God's purposes. She was an incredible author, started this ministry for girls like you that is still blessing girls with a magazine and her books that are out there. But Winter served the purposes of God. The fact that I'm still breathing means that God still has purposes for me here. And so what's beautiful about that is I had like this heart oriented towards moving forward. I had a long grieving season, probably about 1.5 years where I was just like deep down in the muck of it all.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful now is I feel like the season of singing has come. I'm going from my winter season into a spring season. I'm in a committed relationship with an amazing godly woman that I never thought it would even be possible for me to meet at my age. And that comes with its own set of challenges, just like all of life when we change.
Absolutely, yes.
But I'm in a beautiful relationship now, and my girls are in a great place, and God is growing them and challenging them in new ways. And it's hard to say, but life still moves. And we can trust, like I can trust that if Winter left this earth and she knows Jesus, then she married a better husband. Like, she is the bride of Christ. She married a better husband. So I handed her from pretty good to the best, literally the best. And so I can let go, trust and move on, memorialize, honor, recognize, and then see what God has for my future. So.
that is really a profound revelation that God gave you right there, that you gave her to a better husband.
It honestly was life-changing for me when I realized that. When I realized that, oh, what I believe actually makes sense, and it helps me move.
Yeah, because we say all these things, but we don't know until we go through the fire that we, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's when it's really like, oh yeah, all I've been saying, this is really true. Well, I'm so glad for how God has led you through
Thank you.
the winter season, and thank you for coming and for sharing that today.
Well, thank you for having me on. It's a real honor.
It's been so good.
Stay tuned. Monica will be right back with closing comments. For more information on today's guest, visit the website on your screen.
Don't give in. God's word says you're an overcomer. It takes training. It takes discipline. And so when you're fighting that good fight of the faith, you take your story, whatever it is, and you saturate it in faith, and you fight for it.
Visit monicaschmelter.com to schedule Monica to speak at your next event.
Don't miss another episode of Bridges. Subscribe to our YouTube channel today, where you can find all of Monica's latest teachings and interviews. It's easy to do. Just visit youtube.com, search Monica Schmelter, and click subscribe. Once you are subscribed, click the bell icon to get notified when a new episode is available to view. Thanks for watching Bridges.
Today on Bridges, we've talked about loss, we've talked about grief, and we've also talked about receiving God's comfort in our time of grief and allowing others to help us and to reach out. And you know, one of the things that was shared today that is so powerful is that scripture, or the passages of scripture out of the book of Philippians in 4, where it talks to us about thinking about the things that are noble, that are pure, that are right, that are lovely. And one of the verses there says to remember that the Lord is near. And if you right now are in a season of grief, suffering, loss, devastation, whatever that might be, understanding that the Lord is near and that He is a friend that sticks closer than a brother and that He will never leave us and never forsake us, those things can bring you such comfort. And it takes really discipline. It takes on purpose remembering in the midst of loss that God is near. And then to allow people around you to help, to reach out, whether that's to bring a meal, to say a prayer, to share coffee and conversation. We all need Jesus and we all need each other. That's the way that God designed for life to work. If you have life and breath in your body, God's not done with you. He's still working in your life and wants to accomplish His plan, His will, and His purpose. So allow Him to do that today. We're out of time, but we say goodbye and God bless you.